Welcome to Doctors Unbound, your show devoted to doctors who are, well, unbound by physician stereotypes. Get a behind-the-scenes look at doctors that are breaking the mold and breaking into the worlds of technology, writing, investing, politics, just to name a few. This is Doctors Unbound, where you'll hear from experts with the insights to help you go to the next level. Let's get this show started. Here is your host, Dr. Dave Draginas.
Welcome to the next episode of the Doctors Unbound podcast. I'm huddled in the car down the street of this vacation rental, recording this intro. My little terrors, my lovely children are finally off to sleep, and I've got to be careful not to wake them up. Mama Bear is tired, and I certainly don't want any trouble. But also, the show must go on, so here I am recording this intro in the car. I'm really excited to bring you today's guest. He's a doctor that achieved financial independence by age 39. Because what good is earning all that money if you don't know how to take care of it, right? He then looked around the vast internets and decided he could teach physicians a thing or two about personal finance and how to take care of their money. Fast forward a year and a half, and his blog has quickly become one of the most popular in this niche. We get into all that and more in this episode with Physician on Fire. Welcome to another episode of the Doctors Unbound podcast. I am so excited because today's episode is going to be En Fuego. Physician on Fire, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here as well, and I like your use of En Fuego.
A little Sports Center referral there. Did you get to watch any football this weekend?
I not only watched football, but I went down and saw my Golden Gophers take on Middle Tennessee State, the Blue Raiders, and we beat the spread by 3 touchdowns. So we were expected to win, but we won big, and that was fun. And then I watched a few more games in the evening with a buddy. So, Vikings didn't fare so well today, but then, again, neither did the Cowboys.
Yeah, Cowboys didn't do so hot. My alma mater is USC, and they gave me a heart attack.
I watched that game. That kept me up late. I
don't know how they pulled it off. I was like, okay, they're losing another one just like 11 years ago, and then I don't know, somehow they won. I don't think they deserved it, but you'll take a W.
Yeah. The QB, he can really pull out games like that Penn State bowl game last year too, man. That was equally as wild, probably wilder. But anyway, we're not here to talk about football, are we?
No. It was just a little excitement this weekend. So let's
absolutely.
Yeah. So we're gonna get into your blog. We're gonna get into financial independence. Let's start with some basics. Sure. How do you define financially independent?
So financial independence is a term that I wasn't even really familiar with until about 3 years ago, when I kind of stumbled upon a few blogs, and so now I use the definition that I see most often, which is having at least 25 years of expenses saved up, like you or your family's annual spending. If you have that times 25, then you can consider yourself and or your family to be financially independent, meaning that you can live off of that money invested indefinitely with a very high success rate, very low likelihood of running out of money if you have it invested in a smart and efficient manner. You can also be financially independent if you have relatively passive income streams, such as maybe owning rental real estate or other passive income streams, or you don't have to do much work or any work, and the money comes into your mailbox. So there are different ways to approach it, but kind of the easiest and simplest is to have at least 25 years of expenses. And for some people, that's maybe not enough, especially someone like me who is looking at a longer than average length of retirement.
Right.
And I kind of like 30 or 33 times, which you divide that number by 100 and you get a 3 or a 3.33% withdrawal rate when you have that much saved up. And I think that's especially conservative and quite safe.
That's a very cool concept. And what I didn't initially notice about it, but just realized later, it's really based on your spending, not necessarily your earning.
Right. And so most of the traditional retirement calculators that you'll find on a Fidelity's website or somewhere else, they look at what's your annual income, and then they say, well, you should replace 70% or 80% of that in retirement. And that actually works really well if you are spending the vast majority of your paycheck. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, then yeah, you're going to need to replace that paycheck. But really, if you're thinking about it in a way that you realize, well, I don't spend most of my paycheck. I spend what I need to and what I want to. But yeah, it really, the math comes down to how much you need to spend each year. And for people with a high savings rate, well, that's really uncoupled from your income.
Mm-hmm. And are you comfortable sharing with us like what your magic number is? I guess that'll give us some insight into what your spending habits are.
Sure. Yep. And I do. I've shared my tracking of my spending. I use Mint.com, and that it connects to all my credit card and checking accounts, and it tells me what I'm spending. But when I first started reading about all this financial independence stuff, the FIRE acronym, financial independence, or retiring early, I realized that I probably was financially independent, and that was kind of a big surprise. But the number I used to figure that out was annual spending of about $70,000, which was really kind of a rough estimate, knowing that I no longer had a mortgage, and my usual credit card bill was around $5,000 a month, and a few other expenses that I pay off the checking account, like property taxes and whatnot. So 70,000 times 25 was 1.75 million, I believe. Yes, that's correct. And yeah, so that was the number I used to say, oh, my golly, we are financially independent right now, based on having that in our retirement accounts and taxable savings accounts. So now I guess I've shot past that, and on my site, I've got a post where I talk about financial independence versus financial freedom. And freedom, to me, conjures up the idea of a little more than just being independent, but just being more free. And the number I use there is I took that $70,000 a year that I think we're spending, and now I know we're spending. In fact, we're spending a bit less than that. And I said about $40,000 is probably our core expenses. Like that's housing, food, school, things that we really can't scrimp on. And then about 30,000 of that 70,000 in spending is more discretionary. It's vacations. It's nicer things. It's money that we could cut back on. And then I figured, well, if we double that 30,000 of discretionary spending, and then we have 60,000 discretionary, add that to 40, that's 100,000 a year. Now multiply 25 times that to get the financial freedom number, which would be like 2.5 million. And we're I guess we're right around there, maybe just past that now too. So I think that we'd be good to go with a 4% withdrawal rate, even if we doubled the what I would call discretionary spending on vacations and fun stuff. So,
well, yeah. Thank you for explaining that, the financial freedom versus financial independence. That gets a little confusing sometimes. And congratulations, that's fantastic. What are some of the benefits of financial independence for physicians?
Well, they're the same for physicians as they are for pretty much everyone. But really what financial independence does is it gives you lots of options. One of those, of course, is the obvious option to work or not to work, to retire early if that's what you want to do, if you're burned out, or if you just want to take a break, take a sabbatical, spend more time, at home with young kids, etc. You can do that because you're not reliant on a paycheck to live the life that you're currently living. So that's pretty awesome. But a lot of people went into medicine. It's a calling. It's not something they just want to walk away from.
Right.
But financial independence lets you work in the way that you best want to, or most want to, say there are certain procedures that you do that you'd rather not do. Well, you might be able to stop doing those. If you're taking a lot of call and you don't want to take that call, well, you can maybe find a job or work within the job that you're doing to take less call. And if you would rather do teaching and you're maybe burned out of private practice, you can afford the pay cut to take an academic position. You can do international volunteerism. That's medical mission work. You can work at a free clinic. You can work part-time. That's what I've finally chosen to do a couple, 3 years after I realized I was financially independent. So that starts for me in just a couple weeks. I'll be dropping 40% of my clinical shifts and most of my weekday calls. So that'll be that's really what I'm doing to take advantage of financial independence.
That's awesome. And I think you hit on a couple of key things there, especially with, it seems like burnout among physicians is getting talked about more, is increasing. So I think having financial independence, like you said, you can tailor your practice hopefully to a way where that practice is more meaningful to you, where you're getting more joy and more balance out of it.
Right. And, I would love to see some of the causes of burnout go away or be improved, and there are certainly people that are trying to find the solutions and answers and working within our system, but it's a big issue. And
it is.
I'm just looking at what we can do as individuals. We can do our yoga or, whatever it is to find, wellness and resiliency and so on. But, I approach it from just achieving or at least working towards financial independence to allow you to make the job what you want it to be.
Right. And so, again, congratulations on getting there so early in your career. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you were able to get it?
Yeah. And again, it wasn't something that I had as a goal. It wasn't even a term or a concept I was familiar with until, just a couple, 3 years ago. I was saving all along, and I knew that I wanted to set aside a lot of money. I didn't exactly know what that was going to be earmarked for, but I would run numbers in my head and, figured, gee, if I can set aside this, maybe $200,000 a year or something like that, and I'm doing the math and realizing, wow, by the time I'm, ready to retire when I'm 68 years old or something, I might have like $10 million, and I didn't know what I was going to do with that money. But how did it happen? I just I'm an anesthesiologist, as you are. We get paid better than the average physician.
We do.
And that certainly helps. I live in a low cost of living area, and you can get a really nice house for not a whole lot of money. And so I've never been real keen on luxury. Mm-hmm. I don't live like a pauper. I live pretty well on the $70,000 or so a year, $60,000 a year now. And part of what we've been able to do now that we're financially independent is cut our expenses because we had extra money to pay down and pay off the mortgage. I don't keep disability insurance anymore.
That's a good point.
It's vital when you are not financially independent, but you only have that there to replace your income so you can keep living your life. But once you're financially independent, you don't necessarily need to replace your income. So I stopped spending $300 or $400 a month on disability, and I even dropped the term life insurance because, again, I know my wife and kids will be taken care of if I were to meet an early demise. So that's another little savings, but really it just comes down to the math of how much you earn versus how much you spend, and therefore how much you can save. And we've gotten pretty lucky in my 11 plus year career that we've seen the stock market rise, throughout the last 8 or 9 years anyway. And I was investing on the way down as we had a few rough years early on, and then kept investing on the way back up. So I bought a lot of those mutual funds when they were a lot cheaper, and so that actually worked out pretty darn well in my favor.
Gotcha. And I'm trying to remember where I saw this. It may have been on your site, physicianonfire.com, but there was a story in there about taking a loss on a custom build. So you were able to recover it, and for all the the people living out there, just because there's been a financial mistake that you've made in the past doesn't mean that you can't improve and get to your goals.
Yeah, I haven't done everything ideal, and like I said, it wasn't necessarily a goal that I had. But when we took our first, my first quote unquote permanent job, I built a really nice 4,000 square foot house on the water, and we thought we'd be there for 20 years or more, and then the hospital went bankrupt.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so that changed things for us, and of course we had to move on, and also this was a small town, so there weren't really a lot of jobs for people that could afford a house like we had built.
Not a lot of buyers.
No, that the lack of a hospital in town really took away most of the potential, people that would be in the market for something like that. So we ended up holding on to it for several years. We tried, well, at first we had a dentist who was renting long-term, and then we tried seasonal rentals, and I just realized it was time to cut our losses. And fortunately, a guy who had several car dealerships in the area decided he wanted to make that his home. So that worked out pretty well for us. But by pretty well, I mean, yeah, we lost something like $250,000 from what we had into it versus what we got for it minus the realtor fees. So yeah, that stung a bit, but like you said, it's something we could recover from. And, if we had done everything perfectly, yeah, I might have hit financial independence a year or two earlier, but it wasn't something that was going to break us.
Do you remember back what your mindset was like during that time? I'm trying to get a sense, because you've obviously achieved financial independence, and I'm curious what your mindset was when you're going through a loss like this. Is it something where you kind of can see the bigger picture that you're going to be okay, or does it kind of just sting there for a while?
Yeah, so we sold that house. It was just 2 years ago this fall, right about this time. It was just after Labor Day. And I was excited because we had the house on the market for a couple of years. I already knew we weren't going to get anywhere close to what we had into it. And so it was really just a relief. And I guess really the day that I picked up that check, because we had put a lot of money into the house, I wasn't underwater.
Right.
And then I put that money in into our investments. That's kind of the day that I could say, yeah, we are financially independent with the money we have in these accounts. Whereas I guess you could say I was already there based on the home equity, but it's not very liquid when it's in a house that you may or may not be able to sell.
That's
so
true.
It was actually a day to celebrate, even though it was a big paper loss. It was one we had already written off in our minds.
Gotcha. You mentioned a little while ago that you were a saver. So I'm curious where that came from. Is that something that you kind of grew up with, learned from your parents? Or is that something that you kind of picked up later on as you were going through maybe your education training? Where do you think that came from?
Yeah, you mentioned education and training, and as physicians, we are in college and medical school and residency, and most of us have very little money during that time. So you really have to learn to live your life on a very fixed income. And so I think that dozen years or more, for me, it just kind of ingrained those habits. I think for others that it just gets to be a pent up, I can't wait to start spending. And
that's true.
It becomes the opposite. And I had, some of those little splurges early on, but and you asked about childhood, and I really did learn from my parents to find value, look for, get some money, most bang for your buck. My parents took us to a lot of garage sales, a lot of thrift stores, and we'd go to the scratch and dent section at Best Buy or whatever, and yeah, so they like me wanted to get good value for your money. It's not necessarily that you don't want to spend money, but if you're spending it, make sure you get your money's worth, and that's
absolutely,
that's kind of the way that I evaluate any money spending decision.
Gotcha. My parents are immigrants to this country, so especially early years growing up, if we went to Mickey D's, it was a holiday. So we grew up kind of saving as well, and that was kind of ingrained because that was just, you just had to. With one parent household, not making a whole lot, but I think those are good habits that are ingrained.
Right. And my experience was a little different. That my dad was a dentist, so he had a good income. But and I think that kind of helped me in that I saw someone who's making good money, but still not spending
right.
up to his income, So that was a good role model for me, definitely. To have my father would have means, but not necessarily show it off or flaunt it, and he had us working too. I even before I was old enough to get real jobs, I would mow lawns, and I can remember when he tore apart the old deck, and I was probably 12 or 13, and he hired me for the summer to just pull nails from all of these 2x8s, and I was out there every afternoon with a hammer and a Wonder Bar just for $3 an hour, I think, just working on those boards. So
learning
work ethic,
the value of money there.
Yeah, early on was instilled.
Very cool. I'd like to kind of shift here a little bit and talk about Physician on Fire now, your financial blog here that's geared towards physicians. I've done a little bit of research and kind of just perusing online, and I've read a lot of people being impressed with how popular your blog has gotten in a relatively short period of time. And they swear that you must have some secret sauce. So I'm here to ask you the money question. What is your secret sauce?
Well, thank you for the compliments. And I don't know if it's a secret sauce. It's not secret because I've put it out there. If you go to my website and you look at the header, there's a little section called blog tips. You click right on there, and I give you the kind of the 10 best tips I have on kind of what you should do when you start a blog, and I wrote that because I did get a number of inquiries, people asking like, what do you do and how do you do it, and how can I replicate what you're doing? And I am, I'm not trying to keep that information to myself. I like to help people whenever I can, and I find that if you pay it forward, you tend to be rewarded, and so. So I do have those blog tips there, but I'll kind of highlight what I've shared is a number of things. But I guess the first and most important is to decide what your blog is going to be. What's the niche? What is the focus? And then do it better or do it differently, or do it better and differently than it's already been done. So
if I can interrupt you there just for 1 second, I got back from Podcast Movement, and that was one of the sessions. I think it was Chris Guillebeau, who's a blogger and podcaster, and he started his podcast a little bit late, and he said, if you're not going to be early, be different.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. And then so for me, I knew I was going to be focusing on high income professionals, physicians, and I looked at what was out there. The White Coat Investor was the one big one, and there were a couple others that were there, but there were very few. So I knew I had to be certainly different than the White Coat Investor, and I already knew I would be because I know I have a kind of a different style, and I'd also read quite a bit of Mr. Money Mustache, and I really liked the way that he had personal stories, had just really fun, creative writing style. And
I like his writing style as well.
Yeah, and so I kind of combined what in my mind at least tried to take some of what each of them were doing well, because they were both very, very successful with their pages, but create something kind of in between with my own voice as well. And so I had to do something different than the White Coat Investor, and I think I've accomplished that. I know at the time he had a post about it's like 14 reasons not to retire early, and not a whole lot of pro. And I knew that there are a lot of physicians that are, like we talked about, burnt out, looking for kind of a different path.
Right.
And so I figured there was an audience for that.
A little contrarian point of view there.
Right. And there's definitely a lot of other financial independence, retire early blogs out there, but very few for or from kind of the higher income, or at least our level of income. Certainly engineers and other people with six-figure household incomes, but it's a little bit different when every additional year you work can add six figures to your investments, and maybe we don't need to focus on frugality to the extent that it's almost required at different salary points. So
that's true.
So I guess I just saw kind of an unfilled niche, and thought I was maybe the right person to fill it.
Very cool. I'll add a few here, just because I've thought about this as well. I think your writing is great. You're entertaining and insightful, and I think that's a combination that's not easy to achieve. And you're consistent. I mean, you're posting 3 to 4 times a week or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
So I think that's super important. I think it's important to make friends in your niche, and I think you've done that maybe better than other physician bloggers out there that I know. Maybe there's some others out there, but you've done a very good job of networking within the niche. Mm-hmm. And let's see, what's the last thing I got? You took the years to build the knowledge and experience. So I mean, you've achieved it. So you're not really an overnight success, I guess, if you've spent all those years achieving it. So those are the things that I've come up with that I think make you stand out. So I want to congratulate you one more time.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think I'm coming from a little bit of a different angle too, in that I started it after achieving financial independence, so I can kind of speak from after the finish line, and then maybe that sets me apart from some of the other websites. And you mentioned some things that I do talk about too in the blog tips page, but. One thing is to really just be seen everywhere. So early on, I think the day before I registered the domain name, I also got the Physician on Fire moniker as my username on a Bogleheads forum, which is a popular personal finance forum. Uh-huh. The White Coat Investor Forum, which very what's the word I'm looking for? I was very fortunate, anyway, that it started right about the same time that I started my blog. And serendipitously, I think is the word I was trying to come up with, but that's a mouthful. And then, social media, the Twitter, Facebook, I have my name on all those sites, and then just be active on those forums, start following people on Twitter, start interacting, responding to different things you see and sharing, and again, kind of paying it forward. You read a blog post you like, you share it, and then that person might notice that. For me early on, that was just sharing on social media, and then I started sharing some of my favorite recent reads in a Sunday Best post, which is now something I publish every Sunday, sharing, and it's now 10 of some of the more interesting posts that I think readers of my site would enjoy. And that serves a couple purposes. Gets people to my site. It also helps kind of build relationships with other bloggers. When they get a couple hundred, referrals from my site, they take notice, and they're grateful for that. So, yeah, and it's all a lot of fun. It takes time, certainly, but it's not work in the traditional sense of at least what I consider work to be. So, there are times when I have a deadline, and at least it's a self-imposed deadline. I've decided I'm going to have a new post every Tuesday, and tomorrow night I need to write a new post because I don't have anything lined up yet. But I might even spend a Sunday evening recording a podcast.
That's right.
Whereas we could be watching more football, but I've seen more than my share already. So it's all good. It's all good.
So we've talked a little bit about the story of the blog, the idea. Was there a whole lot of preparation that went into it before you launched? Can you maybe take us a little bit through that process?
There was a little bit. I think most of the preparation was really just coming up with the idea, like we talked about. Who am I going to write for? What's the target audience? Who would I expect to want to read this. And so I had the name figured out. I searched to make sure it wasn't already in use by anyone else, and then I wrote about maybe 50 ideas for blog posts that I could maybe kind of use as a just something to refer back to as I got started. But I didn't do a ton of work beforehand. I find it's usually easier to kind of dive into the deep end and then start treading water.
Well, I think you're right, because a lot of times you think about it too much, and then the doubt kind of sets in, and then the imposter syndrome sets in, and it kind of just keeps you from taking action. And that's probably the most important thing is to take action.
Yeah, for me, it was a New Year's resolution. I had this idea, and my wife thought, yeah, I think you could do that, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to start New Year, and I think I had a week off early in January, and so that made it pretty easy for me. The kids were in school, and then, but even so, I didn't do a ton of research ahead of time. There's a screen capture of what my site looked like in the first weeks, and I have that on my blog tips page. It was terrible. It looked like something out of 1997, and but it didn't matter. I just wanted to start and figure out how this works. So I knew nothing about WordPress. I knew nothing about. I don't think I even figured out that you could schedule your blog posts for a later time and date until I'd been doing it for a couple months. Beforehand, I would just write, proofread, and then click publish whenever I wanted to. And then I figured out, maybe I should do this on a schedule. And there's a way for me to do that. And then, I don't know. I didn't do a ton of work beforehand. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So my recommendation, if you have an idea, is don't sit on it for too long. Get started.
Absolutely. I think that's very important. And I think just recently you tweeted that you got your millionth page view for the year.
I did, just last week, and that was
congrats.
Thank you. I was blown away by that. I knew it was coming because I could see how it's been building up, and I really have to thank the White Coat Investor, Dr. Jim Dolly. He and I have kind of partnered in a way that we share some of each other's posts. We actually do some cross-posting, whereas I post some classic posts of his every other Saturday, and he does the same with articles that I've published. And he's kind of helped promote me in different ways since we decided to partner up.
Have you seen a significant increase in traffic since doing that?
Yep. Before we joined forces there, I think I had about 60 to 80,000 page views a month, which I had
which is still great.
Yeah. And that's why he took notice. There were a number of other physician bloggers that had come and gone, or were, maybe not getting that kind of traction. So, but now it's about double that, almost double. So
that's fantastic.
Since March, when we joined up, 6 months have passed, and I'm seeing about double the traffic that I was before that. So yeah, it's happening quickly. And, I think some people kind of take the summer off, or they have better things to do than sit at a computer and read blog posts. But now that fall and winter are coming, I think traffic
pick
will
up again.
Continue to,
Is there anything that surprised you this year about Physician on Fire, the blog?
Well, I did not expect to, have that partnership with Dr. Dolly. So that kind of came as a surprise, the way that developed, which was pretty great. Other than that, I'm just thankful that people continue to enjoy what I'm writing, and as long as we have readers, I'll keep writing for them.
Very cool. What's been the hardest part about starting and managing this blog?
Yeah, the hardest part is probably, the self-imposed, deadlines I've given myself. So my posting schedule, and I kind of base this on the fact that a lot of my favorite blogs when I started were posting every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I said, well, I'm going to post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, because
there you go.
There's less for people to read on those days. But that means I have to have a a new post ready for every Tuesday. Every Thursday is a guest post, or some of them are kind of interview posts that are a little back and forth. And then every Sunday is a compilation. But I haven't missed a single Sunday, in a year and a half. And since I've been on this schedule, that's pretty rigid. It used to be every Tuesday and Thursday were posts of mine, but I've gotten a lot more requests for guest posts and enough quality posts that I'm comfortable posting them. So I think just like I said, there's maybe a Friday night where I might want to watch a movie with my wife, or Saturday watch football, etc., or do something with the kids, and well, if I haven't started on the Sunday best, well, that's kind of what I need to do that evening. So right now it's finding the time, and it does take quite a bit of time. And as you know, doing a podcast, that takes quite a bit of time too. It's not, for me, it's not just writing posts. That's kind of a small sliver of what I do. And for you, it's not just talking to other physicians with a microphone. It's the editing and the promoting and all the interaction kind of things that we discussed earlier. And so, when you're working full time, which I'm still doing for another 13 days, I guess. This is September 17th.
Almost there.
Yeah. Having a family, I got 2 boys that are 9 and 6 years old now, and so we're busy enough. And then I've added this other sort of job that's not a job, but it does take plenty of time.
Very cool. Is there any kind of a productivity hack that you can share? Maybe something that makes you more productive? I don't know, batching some of your processes or anything.
Do you have any for me? Because I'm
the big one for podcasting that people talk about is doing batching. You set your interview day and do several things and kind of batch your process.
Sure. I think if you can, devote a bigger section of time, like say, if I have a weekday off and the kids are in school, well, I'm going to be doing blog stuff, whether it's writing or the other things, lining up, the next 4 or 5 guest posts and doing all the formatting and all that work. I think when I do it in small chunks, 30 minutes here, an hour there, it's hard to get a whole lot done. And I guess as far as productivity, there's downtime. I'm on an airplane. I might be able to write a post with no distractions because I don't buy the internet. So it's just me and the keyboard, and I can usually come up with something as long as it doesn't require much or any research. If I'm sitting watching a football game by myself, well, there's commercial breaks and there are times where I can do, maybe not write a post, but be on Twitter or be on a forum and respond to someone that had a question about investing.
That's true. That stuff is important.
Yeah. So, take advantage of some of that downtime. And then when I am actually writing, then I need to reduce distractions. I'll have a browser open with 19 different browser tabs, and 8 of them have notifications coming in, and I just need to close that out so I can focus on what I'm trying to write. So that's about all I've got, though. I could definitely use more productivity hacks because I spend too much time goofing around.
Well, we'll have to reconvene maybe in like a year or something, and we'll share our productivity hacks with each other.
I'll have something by then.
So you mentioned that you're going to be cutting down your work time here real soon. I
am.
Yeah. What do you look forward to, I guess, the most in this adjustment here in your work-life balance?
Sure. Well, I look forward to having more than a week off at a time. I guess I have had stretches of about closer to 2 weeks, but the way that I am arranging my schedule now, I'll have chunks of up to 3, maybe even 4 weeks off at a time, and
That's
then I'll
fantastic.
watch my shifts and work really hard when I am on duty. But so we are going on a Spanish immersion trip here this fall.
Ooh, tell me a little bit more about that.
So there's a language school, and I don't want to talk about the specifics of where we are until we're back, just for privacy concerns,
Absolutely.
I guess. But I think it's going to be great, and the school is really flexible. You can choose to do an hour or 2 or a half day, and then we're going to be there for 3 weeks. So the first week, I think we're taking it real real slow, and we're just going to do an hour or two in the morning, and then do some activities on our own in our apartment, and then just going out into the community where Spanish is the primarily spoken language, and we've been working on doing some education with our boys for a couple of years now, so they have some basic vocabulary, and my vocabulary is very basic too. Just I had a couple of years in high school, and I play with the Duolingo app, which helps teach you. But other than that, we're gonna have these longer vacations, sort of slow travel, people call it. And so we're looking at the possibility of maybe going to Peru on a medical mission trip in February. And if we are able to do that, we'll stay another couple weeks before or after, go see Machu Picchu, and again maybe practice that second language. And we've got a list of other places we'd like to go with our kids, because I want them to have a little more of a worldly experience. And
I think those are experiences that they're just going to remember for a lifetime. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's good for them to, they're growing up in a pretty comfortable spot, and for them to see that not everybody gets to live like this, and maybe they can appreciate more what we have here,
right,
in this country and in this family and everything else. So I think that's the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to. And the other stuff is just getting more sleep and being around more, and maybe feeling less pressure when I like I said, I've got to write a post tomorrow night, whereas I'd love to be at least a few weeks ahead, but that never really seems to happen, because I do find other fun things to do with my free time. So, and
you're still working, and
yeah.
And so, where do you see yourself or Physician on Fire here in let's say like a 1 year or 5 year horizon?
Well, in a year, I don't think much is going to be different for us. Other than we'll be able to take these longer vacations. And we did meet with our principal, and he said, A-okay to do this, once every trimester, and as long as we're keeping in touch with the school and everything, they're all good with it. But I expect I'll still be writing. I'll still be working part-time. It looks like I'll be doing that for at least a couple of years. And so 5 years? I don't know. I'm guessing I'll be fully retired from medicine, unless I find that I miss it when I'm not doing it as much. I don't expect that to be the case, but I wouldn't be shocked if I, quote unquote, failed early retirement. But I don't think I'll go back to full-time work.
You're kind of, you're dipping your toe a little bit here and seeing how you like it. So I think that's a good strategy.
Right. Take it one step at a time, 1 year at a time. But most likely I'll be done working as an anesthesiologist, but I'll never say never. Sure. And as far as the site, again, if readers are still reading and I still enjoy the writing, then I can't imagine I wouldn't still be doing it. If it does become too much of a burden, say we're spending 3 weeks in Southeast Asia, and I don't want to stop to find 10 posts to feature on Sunday, maybe I'll post less often, but I see no reason to walk away. I do enjoy doing it.
And you might add a travel blog or something like that.
And I think the blog will transition somewhat into more of, here's what we are doing with our financial independence, as opposed to right now I'm writing more about
how to achieve it,
how to invest and how to get there, and reasons why and whatnot. But I think you'll see more travel posts, and I don't know that I would start a new blog, because I've already got a good readership, and I think people will enjoy reading about our adventures. At least I hope so.
Very cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners here before we go?
I think it took me a long time to kind of get the inertia to start figuring out all this personal finance stuff. And so I would say, if you're listening to this and you have any interest in what I'm saying, just try to do one thing this week to maybe improve your financial outlook, and that could be, maybe estimate what you think your annual spending is, or sign up for a service that tracks it. Mint.com is the one I use. I guess Personal Capital also is another site that I use for investments, but it also can track spending. You can do it manually, and I know some people rely on youneedabudget.com to do that.
But anyway, yep.
That's one thing. Yep. Maybe calculate your net worth. I mean, a lot of people probably don't know what they're worth, so figure out what are your assets, what are your debts, and find out where you're at. Maybe figure out how long it might take you to reach financial independence. Maybe just take a little time to think about what makes you happy, and are you happier now that you have a big doctor income than you were as a college student or a medical student? And I think a lot of people do kind of equate spending more with being happier or thinking that it will happen.
And I think a lot of the studies don't show that to be true.
That is accurate. There's definitely diminishing returns once you reach a certain level of comfort, and that level of comfort in the studies looks to be somewhere around, and this is 5 years ago, so maybe inflation has changed it a little bit, but $75,000 of income, or that's equated with spending. But you get maybe a little bit of happiness. Most of it's fleeting from buying new toys and whatnot. Not that there's anything wrong with buying an RV. That's something I want to do soon. But yeah, there's definitely less of a bump in your happiness. And I think once you get to the point where you're spending most of all of your money, you start to actually maybe lose a little bit of that happiness, because you realize you're on a hamster wheel, and there's no real easy way to get off once you and your family get accustomed to having a certain level of spending. And so so just take a little time to kind of explore that relationship.
And maybe do an experiment. Say, hey, for this next month, I'm going to intentionally, decrease my spending and see how you feel.
People do different challenges, like a no spend month, which doesn't mean don't spend anything, but maybe you don't buy anything on Amazon this month, or maybe you you say, well, instead of eating out 4 times a week, we're going to do it once a week, or do something. And reading a book is also a very good start. I've got some recommended personal finance books on my site under the recommended tab, which is not far from that blog tips tab at the top. I think reading websites is great too, but they're kind of scattered. Mine is kind of a stream of consciousness. This is what I want to write about this week, and it's not well organized into chapters like a book is. So I think reading a book can really kind of get you started on thinking the right way about your money and your investments. I think I gave you more than one thing I'd like to say, but
no, I think those are all
encourage action. It's easy to think, I'm going to do that someday. And then
those are all great recommendations, I think, and you started with action, so I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Where can people reach you if they want to get in touch with you?
My website, of course, physicianonfire.com. My email address, and I do respond to every email I get. That's POF@physicianonfire.com. And I'm pretty active on Twitter, as you know.
Yep.
It's the same @physicianonfire. And I'm on Facebook there too. Just search it, Physician on Fire there. I've got a page and a made-up name, because I used to use Physician on Fire as the name of the person, because you have to have a personal account to be able to do certain things with Facebook.
And then
they made
me
change it. They said, that's not a real name. I said, well, I don't want to use my real name. So I just kind of made one up.
There you
anyway.
go.
But yeah, I'm on there quite a bit. So those are the main places you can find me online.
Very cool. Well, I want to thank you again for coming onto the podcast and just being so open and sharing so much great information with our listeners here.
Well, this was fun, David, and thank you again for the invitation, and I look forward to having a listen to our conversation when this comes out.
Absolutely. Till the next episode.
Indeed.
Thank you for listening to Doctors Unbound podcast. Remember to head over to doctorsunbound.com to access all the show notes and resources discussed in this episode. Now, it's your turn to be unbound.